So welcome back everybody. Let's have a look at another formal letter task here. You are not satisfied with the changing rooms in a sports centre that you visit. Write a letter to the sports centre manager, and in your letter explain the problem, say how you feel about this problem, and say what steps you would like the manager to take. So there's not a lot going on in this task. It's a much shorter task than many of the tasks that we've looked at. That should help us to have a clear focus throughout the task. We shouldn't have to be worrying about lots of different elements, and we can stay on one clear path. But at the same time, it may suggest we might struggle to think of some ideas, so we have to consider that aspect as well. Let's go straight into thinking about the keywords here. So what do you think? What are the keywords in this particular task? I think to me it's quite clear that we're going with we're not satisfied. We're talking about changing rooms in a sports centre. And it's a sports centre that we visit. I guess you could highlight that as well. I can't imagine it being a sports centre that you don't visit. Why would you have a problem with that? I don't think we really need to highlight that. But yes, we're not satisfied with changing rooms in our sports centre. We want to write a letter to, it's important, the sports centre manager. And in our letter, we're going to, nice and simple, we could just cover all of that really. Explain the problem, so give some details about the problem. More specific here, how you feel about the problem. So we want to bring in some feeling vocabulary, be very specific about what the problem is making us feel, and also what steps you would like the manager to take. So what steps the manager can take. So what sort of letter are we dealing with here? We know it's a formal letter. And we know it's a formal letter because we're writing to the manager of a sports centre. We don't know him, so we wouldn't use any informal or semi-formal language. And also the purpose of the letter should make it clear what type of, we should make it clear that it's a formal letter as well. So what is the purpose of this letter? Well, I'm hoping that it seems clear to you that this is a complaint letter. So let's just write that down here. Very clear complaint. It has to be clear throughout that we're dealing with, we're writing a complaint, so there's a clear purpose and a clear and appropriate tone throughout. So we've got a complaint letter, and let's just jump straight into the plan here. So we're going to do P2, P3 and P4, whereas the first paragraph, as always, or as is the case a lot of the time, will deal with the purpose of the letter very clearly. So in P2 we're explaining the problem. So what could the problem be here? We know that the problem is with the changing rooms, but what is the problem with the changing rooms? Well, we could actually introduce a bit of a list here. There is the opportunity to use some listing language to improve cohesion and coherence as well. So we might have a couple of issues that we want to talk about. Let's imagine that there is some drawing on the walls or painting on the walls. I wonder if you can think what we call that kind of art. You can use it in an artistic setting, and you can use it in more of a vandalism setting as well. It can be used for both, but graffiti is what we call drawings on walls or paintings on walls. So there is graffiti on the walls, and we could talk about maybe dirty floors. Maybe there's a particular smell in there as well that isn't going away. Just a couple of ideas. As long as they're down there, then you'll save time later because you won't have to think about them on the spot. It's the whole point of the plan. Paragraph 3, we're going to talk about how we feel about the problem. This is where we need to bring in some more emotive language, the language of emotions and feelings. Let's say that we feel it's a nice one for a formal setting. This is the thing. Emotional language is a little bit easier to write about in an informal tone or a semi-formal tone. But when we come to a formal letter, we want to remain composed and sophisticated in our language. So we can use language like undervalued. I feel undervalued. You could also talk about the feeling in terms of what it's making you want to do. And maybe in this case, it's making you want to think about cancelling your membership, something like that. So maybe cancel membership. So we got some emotion language, and we've also got the result of that emotion language as well. It all combines to create the feeling that we have. And in paragraph 4, we're going to say what steps we'd like the manager to take. And let's say that if we're going to stick with the gym, we're going to stay there. We want to see a full refurbishment of the changing rooms. So they have to be completely redecorated, generally improved to a satisfactory standard. Okay, so refurbishment. What would happen if that didn't happen? This is a nice way we can end a letter like this. Again, we can talk about cancelling the membership. Maybe we change the verb end the membership, and maybe we tell other people to do the same as well. But there we go. There's our plan. Very simple as always. And we can move away from the plan and think about the letter itself. How might we start the letter? What would we start with after dear? Well, I think here maybe we know the centre manager's name, but maybe we don't. In the case that we don't, we will go with a dear sir or madame, and we can use a slash in the middle if we want to, or you can use an or, either or. So dear sir or madame. Let's go into the first paragraph here, and we don't have the purpose in the paragraphs themselves, so let's clearly indicate the purpose in the first paragraph, in the purpose sentence. So I am writing to. We almost always want to start a formal letter in this way. I am writing to, and here we have a complaint letter, so we could write complain. Perfectly fine, no problem here, but I'm going to give you something a little bit different just so you have some variety. We're going to say I'm writing to express my concerns. Now I'm using express my concerns because of the very specific nature of this letter. I have a membership at this gym, so we want to express concerns because I'm currently there. This is something that's ongoing. If I went to a restaurant and I had a really bad time and I had no intention of coming back, you might not write express your concerns because you're not concerned, you're not going back. You would just be angry and you would write I'm writing to complain or lodge a complaint. You could also write lodge a complaint here. You would just to add this down here so you have the verb, because you may not be able to hear me correctly, to lodge a complaint. I'm writing to lodge a complaint, but here I'm just writing to express my concerns. Either one is okay. So I'm writing to express my concerns about what? About the... So we're not satisfied. What adjective could we use here to describe the changing room? Something very bad. I'm going to use appalling conditions of the, well, in my case, the male changing rooms. I don't know what the female changing rooms are like, but the male changing rooms. And then we'll just give the name of the sports centre. Let's imagine it's called Beechwood Sports Centre. I want to draw your attention here as well to that adjective appalling. When you use descriptive language like this, when you describe the quality of something, it can be quite easy to fall into informal vocabulary. So if you wrote something like gross conditions or the smelly conditions or the disgusting conditions, that would seem a little bit too strong for a formal letter. Appalling, atrocious, language like this, it's still very strong, but it seems more appropriate for a formal letter. Let's move into the second paragraph. And as I said, I want to introduce a list here. So let's set that up. Very clear, that's what I'm doing, even with the first few words. There are several issues with the changing facilities. Let's change the words here just to show a little bit of paraphrasing ability, lexical resource, which are simply unacceptable. Again, this sort of language, simply unacceptable. It's a very nice collocation for a formal letter. It'd be very strange to see this in an informal letter because it just looks so unnatural in that setting. It's not conversational at all. It's something you would say to a manager. So simply unacceptable. Notice as well we have a defining relative clause here. There is no comma after the changing facilities because we're defining the issues. Notice it's not necessarily the last word in the clause, it may be further back that we're defining. There are several issues which are simply unacceptable. Several issues with the changing facilities which are simply unacceptable. All of that together, but focusing on those issues. So, firstly, nice and simple, there is, and we've got the plan here, graffiti on the walls. Notice the spelling of graffiti, a very commonly misspelt word, even among natives. You've got 2 F's and 1 T, and then the vowels here, I and I. Of course, there's an A at the beginning as well. So graffiti on the walls. And let's give a bit more detail here because there's not much here. How long has that been happening for? Let's say, and this has been the case. So notice the change of grammar as well. We've changed into the perfect tense. This has been the case for a number of weeks now. Secondly, second point, we've got the dirty floors, so let's talk about those. The floors are always dirty. And some more information, which now notice we're choosing to add more information. This doesn't define the dirty floors, so it's a non-defining relative clause, but we're choosing to add a bit more information about this point. So, which, let's say, leads me to question, to ask, but to question is more formal, whether a cleaner is even employed here. Here being in the facility, in the centre itself to work on the changing rooms. Okay, so we've got some nice grammar coming along here as well, and some appropriate formal vocabulary. And then we have one last point to make. So we could say thirdly, but more appropriately we would say finally. Finally, we've got the smell. So there is, let's go for the adjective putrid. You know, really show off our vocabulary here, which essentially sort of means rotten, sort of decomposing. And instead of the word smell, instead of the noun smell, we could go with odor here. So a putrid odor. Let's just give a bit more information and also offer a bit more vocabulary. There is a putrid odor which, nice verb, permeates the room. Which permeates the room. We could just probably end that here. We could maybe add a bit more information, but that's already quite a long paragraph. It usually is the case when we have a 3-part list in a paragraph. Finally, there is a putrid odor which permeates the room. Or even you might just say, and this is very, or let's even go with extremely unpleasant. Again, showing a bit of word formation here as well with those prefixes. Then we can move into P3. We're talking about how we feel about this problem. Let's really bring in some complaint language here. Let's really stress that we're unhappy. So this complete, now a word that we can use to talk about people not meeting their responsibilities, not taking care in the way that they should. We can use the word negligence. Negligence. Now that's the noun, the adjective would be negligent with a T on the end. So this complete negligence over, that would be the preposition we would use. Over, now we've got the conditions here, so I'm going to use the state here, the state of your changing rooms. Okay, let's start with the membership side and then we'll end it with the undervalued part. So has left me considering whether to cancel my membership and look elsewhere. So instead of somewhere else, elsewhere. Much better. And then we can come on to the feeling. I can only feel, this is a nice way to talk about it. It's like you're saying to the manager, you have left me no choice in my feeling but to feel like this, because that's how bad my experience is. I've got no other choice. So I can only feel undervalued. Now notice I haven't written unvalued. that doesn't really work here. Undervalued is appropriate, and it suggests that we aren't being given the value that we should be given. So we're undervalued. We feel undervalued as a member of the gym, as a member of the sports centre. So I can only feel undervalued as a member when this happens. And let's be a little bit more creative here. When my experience, will also show our ability to use comparatives, is deemed, so is assessed to be, or is considered less important than, and we'll use a bit of business language here, marginal profit gains. So they'll get a marginal profit gain or a small extra bit of profit by not employing a cleaner. That seems to be what's happened here. They've made a bit more money by not redecorating the changing rooms. So we're trying to say that it seems like they only care about profit and not about their members. So let's move on into the final paragraph. What steps would we like the manager to take? And again, we can use some really nice complaint vocabulary here. Here we've got a whole expression that we can use to address this situation. I would strongly advise. So that's a nice one you can use for any complaint letter when you start talking about how you would like the manager to fix the problem. To address this situation, I would strongly advise. To address the situation, I would strongly advise appropriate training for your staff. To address this situation, I would strongly advise that you reconsider your menu. So there's a couple of examples of how to use this. So strongly advise in this case, where you look at the plan, a full refurbishment, nice collocation. You could also say a complete refurbishment. Full refurbishment of the facilities. We don't need to say the changing facilities because that is understood. Now it is understood. So the facilities, as well as the employment of a regular cleaner. Because I mentioned earlier that we're not sure that a cleaner is employed. Even if they are, they're clearly not coming often enough. So that regular helps to emphasize that. Now notice there is no comma after facilities before as well as. And this is because the subject and verb remains the same. I would strongly advise the employment of a regular cleaner. So this as well as just emphasizes the separation here. It also clearly helps to distinguish the 2 points I'm trying to make, but there is no comma because the subject and verb remains the same. Okay, another bit of complaint vocabulary. And the nice thing about this one is that we have some conditional language as well. So if no action is taken, notice the passive voice there as well, improving the grammar. If no action is taken, I will be forced to. If no action is taken, I will be forced to. And we talked about it here, end the membership. So end my membership. And let's really dig in here and talk about the fact that we could recommend other people to do the same, maybe our friends and other people at the gym. So, and recommend others to do the same. So we're trying to use as much of our influence as possible. I think that's fine. We can sort of close this off now. And to end a letter like this, what do you think? How should we close it? It should be a yours sincerely or faithfully. Hopefully you're saying faithfully, because we do not have the name of the recipient above. All we've got is sir or madame. If it's somebody's name, then we write sincerely. We don't have to know them personally. We don't have to know them at all. But as long as we have their name, we write yours sincerely. But if not, it's yours faithfully. And then we want to add, let's say, Derek Palmer. But a full name is important because, of course, a formal letter requires it. So there we go. There is a formal letter for a complaint letter, looking at the topic of a sports centre with bad changing rooms. You can work on the gap fill exercise now, and I'll see you in the next lecture.